Hello and welcome back to the Android stage. I hope that you are enjoying the atmosphere of our tropical island that we created for you, because right now here in Prague it's very rainy and cold, so we at least try to bring some summer atmosphere for this day for mDevMeet 2021. We will continue with a talk by Davies, who currently lives in Germany, and his talk will be about material UX. After the talk, Ash will go to the speaker's corner, which is really near the Android stage. I hope that you've already walked around the whole island, so you know where everything is. And you will be able to talk to him, ask questions, and just take part in the discussion about material UX or whatever else you are interested in. Apart from the speaker's corner, there's our networking island, where you can find topics that you can chat about, various topics. I think there are maybe about 15 different topics. Simply walk towards the topic and you will be able to chat with other attendees. Okay. Also, apart from discussion and networking, which is a big part of this year's event, be sure to take part in our competitions. Our partners have prepared some special competitions for you. One is a Cypher Challenge, and the other one is a secret surprise. You will be able to find it when you go to the partners booth and ask about it. Also, apart from the Cypher Challenge, there is a competition about tickets for mDevCamp 2022, which will be next year, hopefully. We really wish to see everybody in person in Prague next year. And you can win some free tickets for the next year's event in Prague. So please take part in the competitions, and I hope that you will enjoy it today. Enjoy the 3D world. I hope it works fine for you. Now I will hand the word to Ash. Okay, so Ash, please, how are you today?
Good, thanks. And sorry to hear about the weather in Prague. I can assure you it is much the same here.
Yeah, I thought so. Well, we are neighboring countries, so I didn't expect that you would have really hot weather there. So that's why at least we did the tropical island. Okay, so I see that you are in good mood. You're looking forward to the talk. So now you have as much time as you need, and please don't forget to join the 3D world after your talk and go to the speaker's corner. So the stage is yours now, Ash Davies and his talk on material UX.
Thanks, Mara. So, hi, everybody. As you might have just heard, I'm Ash Davies. I'm working for Snapp Mobile, and I'm a Google developer expert for Android and Kotlin. My talk today is on material UX for engineers, and it's sort of my experience about working with material design and other designers and product owners and stakeholders and all these different people that might be involved in a project, and having to make sure that working with these people and making sure that they know and understand why material design is good for your app and good for your users. Because as Android developers or Android engineers, we might already be familiar with the benefits of this, but we need to share the love. So I'm to start off with one of the quotes that I felt that was quite prudent to this point, and is that people ignore design that ignores people. If you alienate your users, or if you don't include your users, then those same users are going to be unhappy and going to ignore your app. So it's going to end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're just going to treat these people without the respect that they deserve, and then they are not going to keep your app or pay attention to your app or pay attention to your service. So it's really worthwhile investing in this design. So let's paint this picture. You're briefed for a new feature, and you sit through the nice presentation, the stakeholders talking about their vision for the future and how the application might look, and you get this design. And for a lot of developers and engineers, this might actually be the end of your journey, and this is the design you'd be expected to develop your Android application from. But for some people, you might even get an Android design, especially for it, and that design might look a little bit like this. Now, you might notice here that it's the exact same design, but with an Android frame. And if you're anything like me, this brings you nothing less than absolute frustration and anger, and it's very difficult to manage. But what's important to remember is to stay calm about these things, to not lose your focus, and to actually then think about, okay, let's not get angry, let's collaborate, and let's use diplomacy here. Let's try and work with my colleagues and find out how to work this out. So this is where I'm going to get into the topic, material UX for engineers. So the problem is that you're ignoring your user's expectation, and as such, you alienates native platform consumers. It means that the affordance expectations have been broken, and it means that you're introducing friction to the happy path, and you might have to then introduce onboarding or spend longer development time on introducing these topics or using non-standard components, and you're really not getting any benefit from the native platform. And why build a native platform if you're going to use the same UI across the thing? You may as well just do a cross-platform. This is not an advocacy for cross-platform, by the way. Please don't go out taking the message from this as using React Native is good. Don't do this. So consumer alienation can have some really real risks, and if your app is poorly designed, then your users might find it abrasive. So you're going to find it difficult to retain consumers. Your consumers going to have reduced session durations. They're going to be indifferent towards your app. Why should I prefer this app over this app if it's not going to give me any better experience? You're going to get a worst case scenario, increased uninstall rates. So your users are just simply not going to use your app because they're not getting that joy and that benefit from having a native application. Just use your website or something. So user affordance is a really important topic, and if you don't follow it and if you don't kind of stick to it, it's going to have even more knock-on effects. So it's going to mean there's an increased learning curve. It's going to take your users longer to start learning how to use your application, because the users are unfamiliar to quickly assess the design of the application because they're not familiar with it, and it can take them longer to acquaint themselves with it. There's the risk of consumer frustration. It takes very little time for a consumer to become frustrated with your application. People become impatient. We are impatient creatures, and we've been led to believe that the internet will provide instant gratification. You might have to develop onboarding, as I mentioned, so that you can kind of lead your consumers towards the happy path. If you have to tell a user what to do, then you're doing it wrong. So, as I mentioned, user affordance is a critical mobile design due to reduced and highly contested screen real estate. You need to get your user through to the happy path as frictionlessly and as quickly as possible. So for an example, I'd like to compare this to something that should be quite intuitive, that our tiny lizard brains can put together without really thinking about it. Let's consider the door handle. Now, the door handle, it's pretty intuitive. It's shaped like the inside of your hand, so you would naturally go to try and grip it. It turns radially, so you have to grip it with your left hand, or otherwise if you're on the other side of the door, and it makes sense for you to turn it and open the door. You don't have to think about this. It's become so natural that we just do it without thinking. And that's how it should be for your users. Your users should just be able to scroll and navigate through your app without thinking and just enjoy that experience. There's also something simple as a tap should be so intuitive and obvious that requires zero friction and minimal cognitive friction and zero interaction. You should be able to look at this and know, okay, so I turn it right, it goes cold. If I turn it left, it goes warm, or the other way around. I just defeated my own point. But the point is that it's simple and you know how to operate it. But of course, simple things are still easy to screw up. For example, taking a look at whatever the hell this thing is. But hey, it happens. We're all human. So one of the other problems with not using consistent design experience is that you then have to think about how to build a consistent design implementation. So not being able to use the default component set means you have to then maybe implement your own or go with a non-standard, which is poorly documented or incompatible in some cases, when you can really benefit from just using the standard component for the native development. You won't be able to really reuse these components, as you probably have to build them bespoke each time, or there'll be components missing or something that's non-standard that you have to then build in. So that's additional development time and additional relearning for each new feature. That's just going to be having a knock-on business effect. So it's not just the cost to your users, it's the cost to the business in development time. So material design comes with a wide range of available components predefined to fulfill most requirements. You should never really have to go beyond the default components with the configurable options to achieve what you're trying to with material design. When you're considering native support over cross-platform, it's sort of the primary purpose of native development is to provide these native experiences, to provide these native components for your users, to let them have this consistent ergonomic experience. It allows for powerful user engagement options like notifications, like access to hardware components, like all these different things that wouldn't be available if you didn't have a native app. You have increased hardware capacity because you're not limited by the web browser or by the whatever engine that's running it. So all in all of this is that you need to have a backing to your statement. You can't just say, oh, I think we should be doing this, and then not be able to say why. And it's all well and good that it's, just quote me and say, because this guy said it was material design and we should do this. It's always good to have data on your side, because data is what you can use, is indisputable and undeniable, and it's just there. It's quantifiable, it's irrefutable, and it just is. So a nice quote I like to use for this is, if we have data, let's look at data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. So you're going to have a hard time winning over somebody with your opinion if you don't have the data to back that up. So the most obvious data point we can probably use is the market share. Now, most notably, there's a trend from typically affluent countries to developing nations and third world countries like Germany. So here you've got Japan and America with not so great Android market share, but let's say affluent as the influence there. The UK, 53%, but we're going towards a larger market share for Android in these countries. And then when you go to emerging markets, for example, we have China, Brazil, Nigeria, and India. These markets are very highly Android dominated. So you're really missing out on a large market if you don't consider Android as a primary navigation, primary platform. So despite this ratio, merely having a significant amount of daily active users means that the development cost is warranted. So even if you don't have a large market share in your audience, for example, my last app, we had 35% in our Android market share. This is enough daily active users to warrant having a custom native experience, because you're going to lose out on the retention rate. And as well, you might notice that if you treat your users badly, then maybe they'll just uninstall your app, so then you get less data. So, maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy there. So focus on daily active users, focus on the revenue per user, focus on user retention, and the uninstall rate and session duration. These are all key significant factors to see how happy your user is with your experience and how satisfied they are, and how likely you are going to be able to win them over with a better design or better user experience. So if the usage of material design is so beneficial to Android, then why are we still getting such inappropriate designs? And much of that time could be due to awareness or understanding or time constraints. And now iOS has a significant presence in the business environment because of its perception of a status symbol, because of this perceived value that it has, that it is very predominant in business environments. So it does actually have a result in decision bias. I remember once I was in a small company and the Android and iOS team worked closely together, and the amount of times that the CEO would come in and ask the iOS developers to develop such a feature because he thought it was cool, And then Android was kind of ignored and left to our own devices. This is CEO-driven development because they all have, or they mostly have, iOS devices. I know this is a bit of a stereotype, and I'm really hesitant to use that, but unfortunately, it's a stereotype that does seem to be proven time and time again. So material design is a system backed up by open source code that helps you build high quality digital experiences. There's lots of documentation available, and the website contains a plethora of wealth of information about the process of design and implementation. The crux of it is the material metaphor is a unifying theory of rationalized space and system of motion. It's grounded in tactile reality. So it's designed to mimic the physical real world and how textures interact with each other, cast shadows and reflect light. It's trying to imagine material as mediums of paper and ink interacting with each other. And they consist of a set of principles. Services are intuitive and natural. They provide visual cues and are grounded in our experience of reality. And they provide tactile feedback that responds to the primal parts of our brain and helps us understand these affordances. The fundamentals of light, surface, and movement, these kind of draw the user's attention into what should be interacted with. And it shows a way of dividing space and accenting moving parts. Content is bold, it draws your attention, it implies hierarchy, meaning, and focus. The colors are very strong and show deliberate color choices, edge-to-edge imagery, large typography, etc. And user action is one of the parts of the leading principles of material design, is that it transforms the whole thing and provides waypoints for your user to kind of navigate through your application. These things draw the user's attention, and they are drawn to that. Another principle is that motion is driven by the user. This gives the user the perception that they're in control, and it means that they are more happy with the user experience. If you start moving things without the user's interaction, then it's like, what's going on? Is my app unresponsive, or is it just sentient? No, you need to make sure that the motion is driven by the user and the interface derives the energy from the user's actions. So this should autoplay, but yes. So elements interact with each other, and it shows the user contextual relevance, allowing them to manipulate an environment as though it's actually physical, emulating the real world physics. You can see how these elements are sort of tiling on top of each other and moving around as though you might be moving around pieces of paper. Motion provides meaning. It's appropriate and it focuses attention. Again, attention. You're keeping the user engaged, and you're keeping the user engaged towards the point in your application in which they need to be focused on. So here you can see another example of motion where you have shared element transitions moving from one part to the other. You can see the user has clicked on something, and that's where the animation comes from. This is really useful for the user to see what they interacted with, why it's moving, and how it's interacting with them. This is how you can keep the user's attention. There's also principles of navigation, which is touching more on the navigation stack, so I won't go too much into it. But the idea is you have a fixed start destination. The state is represented as a stack in which the user can go up and back through the stack. The up and back are almost identical, except that up will never actually exit your application, and deep linking should simulate manual navigation. You can find all this in the documentation for the Jetpack navigation library. I really highly recommend using it if you're not already doing so. And as such, you can see how navigation can be done so nice and elegantly between, in this case, it's adjacent ones, so you might not use a navigation library for that, but it's clear how the user navigates through this. There are lots of material studies about material design. You can see this one is an example, Crane. It's a travel app that finds book travel. These are all fictional applications, by the way, but the documentation is quite extensive and really nice to look at. So if you're ever looking for material examples about how I can implement such a thing in your application, go and look at these material studies. They're great. So it's flexible aesthetic. The flow structure guides the user to where they should be at this time, so it shows contextual relevancy. And there's content filtering, so you're not overloading the users with too much content. You can see the consistent color usage of the elements here. So the selected state of the checkbox, the accent of the slider, they're all interactable components and they all share the same color. This is indicating to the user that they can interact with this. I'd also like to highlight the backdrop. It's one of my favorite components in the material design because it uses sort of flips design on its head a little bit, because instead of having the action bar on top of the content pane, you actually have the content pane instead of on top of the action bar. And as such, you get this whole background underneath your content pane that you can then start to reuse for content. So you get all this extra space available in an area where you already had a very limited real estate. So it's really quite cool in that respect. So you can show the relevant information at a time that is necessary. It's immediately accessible, so the backdrop can be displayed from any position. It doesn't have to be from the top. And it's contextual. The backdrop focuses attention on only one layer at a time. There's another example called Fortnightly. Its aesthetic puts the focus on content. So using a grayscale palette that you're looking at the text predominantly, sort of like a catalog structure, so master detail design or main detail design. And it uses the branding to reinforce its own brand. So this is quite useful in kind of enforcing that. Elevation is a really important topic as well. To play the same video again as you saw earlier, how you can see the layers sort of interact with each other. They don't intersect, they only overlap and show elevation. So they show what's important at the time. So this is really important to consider. Sorry. The video has bugged. That's fantastic. Sorry, 1 second. So continuing, another example is Shrine. Uses a minimal aesthetic. You got angled cuts to reinforce the brand, and you have overlapping sheets. This is also using the backdrop component, and it's quite influential. Again, using the backdrop component here, but you can see how they've enforced the brand guidelines by having the cuts off the corner. This is also displayed on the dialogue where the corners are cut instead of rounded. This is allowing you to be a bit more creative with the design. Yeah. Another great example was Inbox. I'm not sure I have to explain why it's sad that we missed this, but yeah, it was obviously folded back into Gmail. But Inbox was a wonderful showcase of effective user experience and material design by usage of focus and material design elements. There's also material design awards. You can see the highlighted elements from each of the material design categories. You've got rough. These are the awards from 2019, by the way, so it's a bit outdated. And you have Reflectly, scripts, and trips. Each one of these was a really nice implementation of material design. And then you also have a variety of showcase material partners in addition to these. Each of these show how you can implement material design in a nice, intuitive, creative way and make use of these components. These are all great examples to display to somebody if you need to sort of win them over, to say, hey, you can use this cool feature. Hey, you can keep your design. You don't have to Googlefy your app. You can make these things your own. You can find the documentation here, and there's a lot of other real-world studies to learn and understand. There's a few topics I'd like to kind of quickly cover, but I think I'm running out of time, so I'll just go through this quickly. App bars at the top used to be called action bars, but they're persistent. They should always be at the top because the users expecting this to be there. It's providing a reliable way for the users to go through your application. The back button's always going to be there, the app button's always at the top, and the consistency is going to increase familiarity. So your user is going to know where to go if they don't have an experience in your app yet. So you have bottom sheets as well. These are quite useful in that they are supporting the content without taking focus away from it. They're flexible. You can display a lot of different types of content, and they're ergonomic. You can display these bottom sheets without having to reach the top of the phone, which might be difficult with modern phones as they're getting increasingly larger. Bad examples, because sometimes you can find poor examples, is don't have the bottom sheet floating on its own. It looks abandoned and looks kind of strange. And don't have the bottom sheet with too much content on it. Here we see the same problem that we had with the burger menu, that you just overload it with too much content and it can't really provide the user with a reasonable choice. You can also make mistakes by putting too much content into a collapsed bottom sheet, like so, where there's so many actions that it can confuse the user, and users are not always the most intuitive of people. So we need to hold their hand a little bit. So focusing on these UI components, it's not just these that bring the whole thing together. It's if UI is the saddle, the stirrups, and the reins, the UX is the feeling you get from being able to ride the horse. It's all of these different things that bring together the user experience that you want to give to your users. So it's also important to remember that finally, that design should be fun. When you go to material design, you should look at these components and think, wow, that looks cool. I want to develop that. And part of the reason we got into engineering in the first place was because it's exciting. Building these apps from nothing and seeing our users enjoy it, it's fun, it's rewarding, it's engaging, and it's part of the reason that we do it, at least I hope. So designing components should be as enjoyable as implementing and using them. A design library shouldn't be restrictive, it should be supportive and allow for brand recognition. And you should be able to use material design whilst having this enjoyable experience. Designing should be enjoyable, finding creations should be fun, and these user experience problems should be genuine and authentic and give a genuine joy to your users. Play. It's not playing. Okay, well, this was going to be a video on showing how you can customize material elements and building on that, but never mind. So if you're having difficulty on persuading your fellow developers or fellow designers or product engineers or product stakeholders on doing these things, you sort of have to become the advocate for your own argument. So become the material user experience advocate in your own company. You can hold material presentations. That's actually where this presentation started. I started giving presentations internally about how material design is important, and that started to win people over because people can then see how passionate you are and see the rewarding parts of it, and it works out really well. You can host code labs and workshops, so you can then help people in a collaborative fashion, and you can create guilds and discussion groups and things where you can use diplomacy to get buy-in from your colleagues. There's tooling as well, so material design kits for Figma and Sketch and XD, and there's a material gallery plugin for Sketch. And there's a material design gallery application for Android, where you can actually review designs on your phone, which is quite cool. So in closing, like I said, it's not just these UI components. It's not just the single individual design. It's not just the single animation. It's not just a transition. It's all of these little things brought together that bring you a user experience that is truly enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. So please now go to the 3D world and go to the speaker's corner. I'm sure that our attendees want to hear about your tips and tricks that you have up your sleeve, I'm sure. You can also join the games that our partners prepared for you. One of the game is where you actually can win some flight tickets. So not only you can fly in our 3D world, but also in the real world. So thank you very much. Now you have about 30 minutes until the next talk will start. So Ash, thanks again, once again, and see you in a bit.